evening, everybody. Thank you for coming tonight, and a big thank you to our panellists who I'll introduce shortly. A few housekeeping rules to begin with. The toilets we've already found along the corridor, and there's more than just the teachers' ones, there's some student ones as well. Because we're in the sixth floor block, you don't have to get down too low. So we've got our fire exits on both sides of the room, and if the alarm does go off, then please could you make your way to the sports hall where we can check you off from the register. And for the final bit of housekeeping, we do have the media here tonight, and we will be recording the meeting. So if you're asking a question and you don't want to be recorded, when you start to ask the question, please indicate that part should be recorded. Thank you. I've called tonight's meeting to allow residents to get a better understanding of the proposed changes to some of our health services here in Erewash, and also the financial savings that are being made. Cool. So financially, the health economy across Derbyshire faces a shortfall in excess of £90 million, and it expects savings of £51 million. These savings represent a 3% of the total budget for healthcare across Derbyshire. And the aim of this meeting is to clarify exactly what savings and changes are being considered and what potential impact these decisions may have on our services here in Erewash. Our speakers tonight have been invited as they are all involved in making the decisions about our health services, either locally or more widely across Derbyshire. I'll ask each of them to make an opening statement and ask for questions from the floor, because this meeting tonight is for people to find out what is happening. And then we'll close the meeting with short comments from each of our guests. I know at that stage Dr. Clayton has to leave because he has a prior appointment. It's very good for him to squeeze us in tonight. So if you see him sneak off, it's not because of any other reason than he did warn me in advance. But I don't take any more time because we do want to hear your questions. So I'll briefly introduce each of our guests. So on the far side of me is Dr. Chris Clayton, the Chief Executive Officer for Derbyshire CCGs. We have Sarah Jones, Executive Director of Commissioning Operations for Derbyshire CCGs. Dr. Avia Bhatia, who's the Chair of Erewash CCG. Vicky Taylor, Derbyshire SDP Director. William Jones, who's the Chief Operating Officer for Derbyshire Community Health Services NHS Foundation Trust, and Gavin Boyle, Chief Executive, University Hospitals of Derby and Burton NHS Foundation Trust. So if we can start with Dr. Clayton for a brief introduction.
Thanks, Maggie, and thank you for inviting me. And I do apologise about needing to nip off, but I will be here for the majority of the questions. So good evening, my name is Chris Clayton. I'm a Lancashire lad originally and came to Derbyshire in October last year. I'm a doctor by training and by background, specialising in general practice, but over the last 10 plus years or so have increased my role in NHS management. And now I'm here full-time managing the CCGs across Derbyshire. We have 4 CCGs, and obviously tonight we're talking about Erewash, and I'll be happy to take questions about where we are. I'll stop there because I think it's more important that we hear from you.
Just go with the line.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Vicky Taylor, and I am the Derbyshire STP Director. So STP stands for Sustainability and Transformation Partnership. It rolls off the tongue, I know. Essentially, the STP, Sustainability and Transformation Partnership, is about bringing health and social care organisations, so all of the healthcare providers and commissioners, so Chris and Zara and Abby colleagues, who buy healthcare for us locally, about bringing all of those organisations together to work in a very collaborative way to make sure that we're delivering services for our residents, for a number of ourselves who live in Derbyshire, in the right place, whether that be in a hospital, in a community setting, or indeed in our own homes. And that's the purpose of the STP.
Thanks, Vicky. So good evening, everybody. My name's Gavin Boyle, and I'm the Chief Executive of the University Hospitals of Derby and Burton. And just to be clear about that, so I'm responsible for here in Derby, the Royal Derby Hospital and London Road Community Hospital, but also now Queen's Hospital in Burton and the community hospitals in Lichfield and Tamworth. So in terms of the Erewash community, my organisation's I guess an important provider of general hospital services, but also specialist hospital services based at Royal Derby. In terms of Ilkeston Community Hospital, we don't run Ilkeston Community Hospital, but through an arrangement with Derbyshire Community Health Services, we do provide a whole range of important services, outpatient clinics, those sorts of things into Ilkeston Hospital. I'd say for my part, as somebody responsible for providing acute services in Derbyshire, I do see Ilkeston Community Hospital as a really important part of the local health and care infrastructure, and part of the conversations that I'm involved in with Derbyshire Community Health Services that operate Ilkeston Hospital is how do we develop a greater range of services and new things that we can offer local people in Ilkeston, and I'm happy to say a little bit about that later.
Hi everybody, my name is Will Jones. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for the Derbyshire Community Health Services Foundation Trust, as Maggie said, often abbreviated to DCHS. So we provide community-based services across the whole of Derbyshire and Derby, and as Gavin's already said, Ilkeston Community Hospitals is one of the network of community hospitals that we provide. But the vast majority of care that we're responsible for is provided in the community, in people's homes, with less happening in hospitals across the county now. More of that to be discussed later. I've been in Derbyshire since 1986, a whole range of responsibilities, and I'd be very pleased to try and contribute to the debate this evening.
Good evening everyone, my name is Zara Jones, I'm Director of Commissioning Operations for the Derbyshire CCGs. I'm not related to William, in case anyone was wondering. I've only actually been with the CCGs just for a few weeks, but actually my NHS career started in Derbyshire and I've lived in Derbyshire for the last 15 years, so really looking forward to hearing people's views and concerns, and hopefully we can allay some of those concerns through the conversations that we have this evening. So my role is very much working with Abby and Chris within the CCGs to plan and buy the most effective healthcare that we can for our local populations.
Hi everybody, I'm Abby Barty, I'm a GP in Long Eaton. I've been a GP in Long Eaton for about 18 years. I also work in GP education and appraising GPs. As you're probably aware, the CCG is an organisation encompassing 12 practices across Long Eaton and Ilkeston. I've been its chair since its inception, approximately 5 years ago, and one of the roles I have within the CCG, along with my GP clinical colleagues, is to provide clinical input and guidance to the decision-making processes that go on. I look forward to answering some of your questions this evening.
Thank you. So who wants to kick off with their first question? Oh, one more.
Hi there, mine's a question for Vicky.
Could you say, when you do ask a question, say who you are, and that just helps us to...
Right, my name's Terry Ryan, Vicky, and I listened with interest to you talk about the notion of integration of services across health, social care, and there are other parts of services that should be included in that, notably the district council, the third sector, and yet none of them are here. Why would that be? If the county council service begins to suffer for whatever reason, then that will have direct effects on services like home and hospital services. So why aren't they here to begin to talk about the subtleties of this, rather than just a headline? The third sector is likely to disappear in Erewash. Why isn't someone here to begin to talk about the effects on that, the very important sector of service, because of decisions that you're making? There are significant groups of people that should be here if you're serious about delivering integrated, joined-up services, and they're not.
Can I ask what
Well said, mate.
The voluntary sector. No, the voluntary sector.
Oh, I see.
They've always been seen in all the publications from government around integration. There's been very significant stakeholders and partners. They're not here.
And I think they are very the audience rather
Yes.
Sorry, can we stick to one question at a time? Because also people are not, it's asking a question, making comments between each other, it's not really going to work.
So thank you for your question. I think it's a very valid challenge. I think we could potentially have had a cast of thousands on the panel actually if we were to include everybody who is involved in delivering integrated care services in Erewash. And it may be that future meetings can involve other parts of the system that help to provide some of those services, and we'll be able to answer some of the questions that you might have in relation to that.
Can I just have the right to reply? Adult care, in terms of county council provision, is the most significant service outside of health.
Yeah.
If that goes, everybody's in trouble.
Yes.
So, you know, I'm not clear really why they in particular, but all the others as well. District councils have a specific responsibility about housing vulnerable groups that might require these integrated services. It just doesn't add up to me that those people weren't thought of.
Mr. Riley, I completely understand where you're coming from.
Call me Terry.
Fine. And I think the issue is we're talking about NHS funding tonight and the NHS services. I completely agree that obviously the integration is important, but I think the purpose of the meeting is to get an understanding of how the health service side of things is changing and the financing side of that. And I would, like Vicky said, probably future meetings we can have a different audience. So I think obviously the message is taken on board. The local authority, I know, are involved in the discussions. I know Dr. Clayton has been to scrutiny boards and various other meetings, and obviously I've had discussions with them as well. So I think it is part of the ongoing discussion, but I think tonight we're talking about the health services. There was a question of a were you stood up in the red?
I was just stood up so I could see.
Oh, right, fine, sorry. Yeah, the front there.
Alan Thompson. My question is for Maggie. Now, given that the staff from Ilkeston Community Hospital have now been told that there are bed losses from the 1st of October.
Perhaps, could you stand up when you ask the
Yeah,
question?
no problem.
More chance to speak at the back.
Because
So we haven't got roaming back.
So I can speak to the audience. So we've now been told that the staff from Ilkeston Community Hospital have been told that there will be bed losses in both wards from the 1st of October. Firstly, I think it's farcical that this meeting is being held less than a fortnight before these bed It's an absolute disgrace, if I'm honest. But what I want to know is, after Maggie said that a lot of people in this room who've been campaigning against these cuts were scaremongering, I want to know if Maggie will now acknowledge that we were not scaremongering, and if she will now back our campaign.
Hey!
That is scaremongering.
Let the man speak, I'll check, get the man speak. Get control from the floor here, let him speak. Let him speak.
I've never once, personally, I can't speak for everybody in the room, but I've never said we were going to close the hospital. I've never said any of these people were going to close the hospital. What I've said is that there was, from what we have heard, dangers of beds being closed. We're now hearing that less than a fortnight from now, there are beds closing at this hospital. What I want to know is if Maggie will acknowledge the fact that we were not scaremongering on that front, and if she will now support our campaign.
Well, tonight we've got some real experts here of why the change is being made. I'm not I want a very vibrant hospital that provides a range of services. And that's what I campaign for, and is what I've been talking to the guys all across the table and various other people, numbers of other people about, to actually make sure that we can get the best possible healthcare that we can.
It's not good enough, Maggie.
That's a lie.
It's a
It
disgrace.
cuts, Maggie.
let's use the right words. If you don't speak English, it's cuts, not changes, cuts.
So, Maggie, if it's okay, let's talk about this issue now. So I think it will take some explaining, but I'm happy to do it. And if you give me your patience, I'll get to the answers that you are looking for. And as a panel, I'm sure colleagues will support the conversation.
Can't hear at the back. Can you pitch your voice up a bit?
Well, is that better?
Yeah.
Is that better? Can you hear me at the
that's
back?
better. Yeah.
Is that okay? Thank you. So what I'll say is, let me start talking through the issue about community beds and the community hospital, and I hope I'll be able to clarify the position as to where we are. So, it is true to say that there are different types of community beds and services that we have outside of main hospitals such as Gallons. It's also true to say that we need the right proportions of those beds to make sure that we can offer the right care for patients, because not all patients' needs are the same, not all patients are the same. In the south of the county of Derbyshire, in Derbyshire, it is known, and the system agrees, that we probably have too many of a certain type of bed, and those are the... Excuse me, if you'd allow me to continue, I said... and I'll explain. So excuse me, in terms of the different types of beds, if we also talk in technical terms, we talk about the different pathways of beds, pathways 1, 2 and 3, which describes the different levels of care that's needed. And that ranges from care in people's own homes to care in a community hospital such as Ilkeston. It is well accepted, and we've done some work as a health and care system, which includes the local authorities in that work, that says that actually we do have, and we use more of the pathway 3 beds, like the ones at Ilkeston, than we need to. But the work that you need to do is to say, okay, if we don't use those beds, what are the other types of beds that you need, or care that you need, to replace them? Now, not unlike the work that's gone on in the north of the county, better care closer to home, we need to review that situation in the south of the county to make sure that we have the right care for patients. Now, this is an important point, because it is also well known that placing patients in the wrong type of bed can also be harmful. And actually, if patients do not need a hospital type of bed, but actually would do better in their own homes, that they do, their outcomes are better. So there is basis to this. In terms of the situation with regards to the Ilkeston beds, it is right to say that we have been looking at those bed numbers. It's also right to say that we've got some work going on at the moment that's been all over the summer, thinking about what are the types of beds and the numbers of beds that we need, particularly going into this winter. I'm expecting a report on that in the days to come, and I'll be advising governing bodies on that in accordance with it. But the governing bodies are clear, as they were when they looked at the situation in the north of the county, that we won't close beds until we're sure, and we've got confidence, particularly going into winter, that we have the alternatives in place, which includes the conversations with local authorities and other partners. And that is where we are. So the situation is that there won't be a ward closure imminently. We are reviewing the information that we've got about the numbers of beds, and we will take any decisions in relation to that in full public view. And I hope that helps maybe set the situation straight.
Just what? On cuts?
I'm going to
Why
ask
don't you
you-
say cuts?
Let's hear from William, because it's Ilkeston Hospital. He runs the Ilkeston Hospital.
Thanks, Chris. As I explained, I'm responsible for running the hospital, but what we provide, what Gavin provides from the hospital in Derby, what we provide across the county, is entirely reliant on what Chris and Sarah and Abby commission from us. And I can confirm that we haven't had any instruction to be closing either of the wards on the 1st of October. But what I do want to do... What I do want to be able to do is to say that it's been a long process to get to where we are in the north of the county and the Better Care Closer to Home initiative that Chris has described. That work started 4 years ago, and we have been able to very, very successfully provide more care for people that traditionally years ago would have been receiving care in a community hospital rehabilitation ward, and we've been able to work with Derbyshire County Council Adult Care, and we're now providing a lot more of that reablement and rehab care in community care centres across the whole of the county. There is good evidence that what Chris described is appropriate, and we have a responsibility locally to work together to make sure that we're providing the best care that we possibly can, and for people to be receiving that care in the most appropriate environment.
Danny had a question.
Yeah. Thanks, Maggie. This is really, I'll stand up so you can hear me. Danny Tracy. This is really for Chris and quite possibly William. Derbyshire County Council are actually moving all of us, it's home care services, to a 7-day service. For primarily so they can have hospital discharges, so they can stop bed blocking and free up beds in hospitals. If you're talking about closing beds at Ilkeston, why aren't you actually using those beds? So at the two main hospitals that Erewash does access, QMC and Derby Royal, why don't you use those beds for hospital discharge? And why don't you bring your hospital discharge team onto a 7-day service instead of it finishing at 4:30 on a Friday and doesn't start up again until 9 o'clock Monday morning? Because that is what our domiciliary service organisers are telling us. We're also losing, by the way, the out-of-hours service for home care, and that is to do with central government's cuts, because central government has actually cut some 90 million plus and still counting off the adult care budget.
Oh my God.
And that is affecting every one of us. And the reason it's that, because we keep giving money to the NHS, and the first thing we do is give people like that massive pay rises.
Hasn't had a relative.
Sorry, we're doing one question at a time, Maggie.
Yeah, thank you. If I start that and then pass the microphone down, probably via Gavin, Gavin about discharge teams and hospital discharge, and Will about community picking up of that. That's exactly what I've just been describing, sir, is these different types of beds, which includes beds in care homes run and commissioned by the local authority. So the local authority, county and city, are part of this conversation I'm talking about the bed modelling that we need. So there's a crossover between NHS sold beds and then community beds, which are often, sometimes as you say, in care homes, but with NHS support into them, or in people's own homes, with support services going in. So that's exactly what we're doing. What we're talking about at the moment is making sure that we have the right numbers of each to be able to run services effectively. And that's the point I'm talking about.
Why is Bright Street closed then? Because you're on about in your own homes.
Yeah.
Why is Bright Street closed? 26 years. 26 years.
I'll just pass to Gavin about the discharge and the teams.
Thanks, Chris. As you can imagine, being responsible for Royal Derby Hospital, we've got a large A&E department. We've seen growth in emergency patients who need our care, and a key part of that is being able to admit patients when they need to be admitted. And in order to admit patients, you also need to be able to discharge patients. So, just to reassure you about discharge teams at Royal Derby, they work 7 days a week. And interestingly, I spent some time this afternoon with colleagues in the discharge team, and what's really pleasing about that team is it isn't just my people, Royal Derby Hospital people, it's Will's people are in there, it's local authority colleagues in the room helping us. It's an integrated team, so we're people work in partnership to try and make sure that patients get into the right place, because that's what enables us to admit those patients who are waiting at the front door who need our care the most. I just want to say a couple of things about Ilkeston Hospital in the context of hospital discharges, and just to say that Ilkeston Hospital is a really important partner for us, because that is a place that we discharge patients to, so we do rely on having that out of hospital or out of major acute hospital capacity in Ilkeston. But Chris's challenge is a fair one, and it's one that we've spent a lot of time considering. In that one of the features of our health community is that we need to discharge people from the main hospital, but sometimes we discharge patients into beds which are not quite right for them. So Chris was describing the different pathways, and the analysis that we've done would suggest that we need more of what's called pathway 2 beds, but these are sort of residential beds that have therapy support, and sometimes we can't access those beds because there aren't enough of them. So what we tend to do is to put people into community hospitals when actually they're better served in some of those pathway 2 beds. So one of the challenges we've got as a health community is how do we shift that balance. But the thing that's really, really important, and I was delighted to hear Chris say it so clearly, is that you need to make sure that the alternatives are in place and you've got confidence that those alternatives will work before you make a change. And for me, as somebody who's responsible for the hospital, and obviously very minded about the quality of care we offer our emergency patients, that's a really important reassurance. We need to make sure that the alternatives are there before we make a change. So I'm heartened that Chris has said that so clearly, because I think that's a really important assurance for you.
Right to reply, Maggie?
Did you want
I'll say a few words,
Yes,
and then
just
that was you at the time. So just to reinforce what Gavin was saying, we have this integrated discharge team based at Royal Derby, and a very senior and experienced nurse. Her name is Lisa. She's actually employed and retained by the Derbyshire Community Health Service Trust, but has an accountability to both Gavin and myself. Her staff, as Gavin says, consists of other very experienced nurses. All of them have worked in the community, so they understand and can assess patients that are appropriate for coming into a community environment. There are OTs who are members of that team, and local authority colleagues from both the County Council and the City Council. And they're working 7 days a week. And one of the really important tasks that they have is to be constantly going around the wards at Royal Derby to actually be working with the doctors and the nurses on the wards to actually find people at the best time for them to be able to realise their full potential. And the vast majority of people, and it is our objective, go home straight from hospital. It's only for those people who really need that additional rehabilitation, and it's about then that team finding the right place for those people so that, again, they can get the maximum benefit.
Right to reply?
Because a lot of hands coming up. If we've got time, we'll come back to you if that's all right.
Right, I'd like to reply to what they've said to my questions, their answers, because what they're actually saying is very untrue. You asked the ex-director of adult care, Joy Hollister. She has said, before she left, that they can't do hospital discharges. Roger Miller, Simon Stevens, service directors of adult care have said they can't do hospital discharges out of hours at weekends. That's why they're actually going to the full 7-day service. So they're taking the first step So the NHS then take steps to try and free up hospital beds. And I would like to know as well, how many actual beds have we got in care homes in Erewash, which is Laceway Court, Ladycross, which is currently shut but opening back up in October, I do believe, and Hazelwood. How many NHS beds have we got?
Can we, I think, Will wants to
All I wanted to say, I'd be delighted to speak to Roger and Simon. I haven't spoken to them today, but there's not many days a week that I don't speak to them. And we're constantly working together to make sure that discharges happen. In addition to what Gavin and I have just described, within DCHS we have community nurses working on Saturdays and Sundays, we have OTs and physios working on Saturdays and Sundays, and we could quite easily demonstrate to you that patients do move around at the weekend as well as during the week.
Come and speak to some of our DSOs, they'll tell you a different story.
Fourth row up, I think it was... Yeah.
Seriously, could the panel explain the reasoning around the decision to change the opening hours for our local minor injury unit at Ilkeston Hospital? Was the decision based on finances or use of service?
Well, again, I'll need to. I'll start the answer off, and I'll need to pass back to Chris. It was a decision that we took together. We don't always agree on everything, but I am absolutely clear that we did agree on the minor injury units issue. There are 4 minor injury units in Derbyshire that DCHS are commissioned to provide. There's the one at Ilkeston, there's one at Ripley, there's one at Whitworth Hospital in Matlock, and there's another one in Buxton. And a couple of years ago, we moved them from 24-hour opening 7 days a week to 14 hours a day, 8 till 10. And you're absolutely right, a few months ago they were reduced by an additional 2 hours. And what we did was we looked at the profile of when patients attended these very busy units. And the profile of activity demonstrated really clearly at all 4 of the units that between the hours of 8 PM and 10 PM there were many less patients that came during the rest of the daytime. And we have a responsibility spending taxpayers' money to make sure that we're using our money and the money we've got in the best way. And I had no problem at all with the conversation that we had about the reduction in the minor injury unit. It was not providing value for money. And there is also lots of evidence that demonstrates that the further that you get into the evening and the night, most people who have a minor injury or have a minor illness, that turns up during the daytime. And there's lots of evidence that demonstrates that the further you go into the night, the chances are that people have got acute illnesses, and going to a minor injury unit isn't the most appropriate place for them to go. Do you want to comment, Chris?
Got the answer. How many questions?
Put your dummy back in.
So we'll answer fully. Yeah, take another question.
The gentleman there behind that.
I've had my hand up.
Thank you. My name's Brian Lucas. What I find acceptable is that a meeting like this needs a chair. What I find unacceptable is that it's our MP, our first port of call, who was sidelining the issues by being the chair on this issue. And while we have these distinguished guests, who I see as no more than NHS accountants, my question to our MP is this: do you or do you not support, and I'll use the language from the table, the savings that's been spoken about tonight for the future of our community health? Thank you.
Yeah, good question.
Yeah.
I felt it was important to hear from the people who have got operational responsibility for delivering healthcare across Erewash and across Derbyshire. That's why I pulled the panel together tonight that we've got. And You know, they are the experts. They know how they deliver it and what changes they intend to make and what impact those changes may have. They are the experts, and I'm sure you want to hear from the experts rather from somebody who is a politician.
So these people here don't know what they're talking about.
You're MP.
And I'm the Member of Parliament, and that's why I lead. I've set up a meeting, and I'm leading, and I've brought together the people who are the key decision makers and the influencers regarding healthcare.
You know, you're talking about professionals. I'm sorry, you're talking amongst yourselves, really.
Right.
And you're not taking enough questions from the floor.
Yeah.
You talk about expertise. Me personally, I'm going to speak for myself personally. I'm 75. I have a son of 53 years of age who has Down syndrome. I don't think any panel can educate me with that's concerned. But what does bother me is the young lady, sorry, I don't know your name, on the left, when you talk about this joined up thinking, and there is bed blocking, wrong type of beds, you talk amongst yourself of which is the best way to save a few bob, but there's people in here, it's not a one size fits all. It's like you're the panel there. You don't know everything, but you've got to start listening to the people that's actually giving the time free. Like the laundry section. It's been going for quite some time. And what you're snatching back is myopic. But actually joined up thinking, and I admire what you're trying to do, but you're a new kid on the block, but it's too little, too late. And you need to start talking with each other and start listening to the volunteers who save a lot of money. You think about all the people that put that care in a community that'll finish up wanting one of those bloody beds in your hospital. Short-term savings for long-term pain.
Pass the book, Maggie, you're all right.
If you want an answer from somebody who's exactly...
You set up the meeting, what did you sit in there for? You should be here.
So, if you'll allow me just to say a few words on the voluntary sector. I think Sir May was making a comment, but I will just pick out some important points there about the voluntary sector and just where we are with decision making and the finances, and then we'll get back to questions. In terms of the introduction that Maggie gave, that is the true financial position of the NHS in Derbyshire. That is the position. That in this financial year 18-19, that we have a shortfall of £95 million. That is fact. And that we need a savings target in that of £51 million to achieve what they call a deficit of £44 million. It's important that we do that, but because by reaching that saving target, NHS England will give this financial year the £44 million that we're short to the Derbyshire health system. So that's fact, that's a position of fact. When you review the savings plan and the savings that we do have, we look at the whole health system as part of that, and particularly we look at the essential services that we have and that we want to maintain. And we've talked tonight about, our A&Es are busy, our hospital beds are busy, and we could go on and list what they are. As commissioners, we've looked at the whole range of spend that we have, and we've taken some very difficult decisions in where we're looking at savings. And yes, we are looking at the voluntary sector in relation to part of those savings. We're currently going through a process which is in the public domain. There is no secret to it. I was held to account by Derbyshire County Council's health scrutiny a week ago.
But you haven't been consulting them, have you? No.
Scrutiny does not work at the CCG.
I'll continue to answer the gentleman's comments.
I told you off.
We are looking at
the
that.
meeting.
And we are looking at all of the areas of spend. The truth of the matter is, the governing bodies have not yet made a decision. We are still in the process.
According to what I've been reading here, where the order is concerned, what I would like to say, please don't talk to me. Talk to the rest of the people
you're talking like this, you're going to run out of time, you'll be off on your merry way, and then we'll be, so just listen to them.
They weren't satisfied with your explanation of what the savings are going to be, and they called you back on the 1st of October to explain yourself. I was there at the meeting.
Can we let the original question be answered, and we'll try and get around as many questions as possible, but if you keep interrupting, we won't get the question answered.
Yeah, it's a fair point. It's been said, can we have an answer?
So I believe I was answering in terms of the full areas that we're looking at. And yes, we are looking at the voluntary sector as we are looking at the whole of our health spend. We are being really careful in the areas that we are looking at. We are trying to ensure that we maintain our essential services that the NHS delivers. It is true that we are looking at areas of spend that statutorily the NHS isn't obliged to spend.
I don't want to be rude, but that's fine. That lands that'll do for me. Talk to somebody else.
John, you cut my eye a bit ago.
Thank you, Maggie. I'll stand up very carefully because the NHS neighbours make it on the right tonight, and it's working very, very well. It took me a long while to get it, but it's working very, very well. All I can hear tonight is how can we achieve a race to the bottom.
Yes.
And that race to the bottom is a dual one. It's the NHS and it's the voluntary sector, which absolutely filled me with dread. Because Erewash community concern. I mean, what's your take on that, Maggie? You've not put it out. As far as I know, you've not publicly said that you condemn the court to or the closure. I think it's leading to a closure.
Redundancy notice has gone out.
Now, I'm one of the local councillors here in Kirkland, and I've got quite a number of residents who are waiting for garden services, they're waiting for laundry deliveries, they're waiting for all sorts of services that everyone's concerned deliver. Now, how are they going to deliver? They're not. They're going to have to fend for themselves, aren't they?
They're going to die or end up in hospital.
And you've got no bed.
Nobody cares about them. That's the bottom of the line. Shaking your head, Maggie. That's the bottom. That is the bottom line. The voluntary sector, as I said, filled me. The cutting of it filled me with dread. Now, Erewash community concern wants saving. Otherwise, you're not just cutting the NHS, you're cutting everything. I'm going to be left with nothing whatsoever.
Yes, totally.
I have had an extensive meeting with Community Concern Erewash, and they are in the audience tonight. So you can't say I'm not interested. Well, some of these conversations I have as a Member of Parliament are actually quite private. But I have acted on their behalf as they requested.
Why have you not spoken out in Parliament? Why have you not spoken out in Parliament to the government? The government are making all the cuts with the money to NHS England.
If you think the government's making all the cuts, can you answer this? Why actually the Erewash itself received an extra,
It's plugging the gaps from years ago of starvation. Starvation of money. It's been starved of money, and now you're plugging the gaps.
CCG got an increase of 2.8% for this
year. It's a drop in the ocean.
Inflation of 4%.
Investment of £6.5 million to increase surgical capacity in the Royal Derby, which also have an impact on the Ilkeston Community Hospital with regard to endoscopy. There's a £7.5 million fund for Derbyshire for tech transformation, which is not to change the way it's provided. There's going to be £8.65 million that's been announced recently for more escalation beds at Royal Derby. There's £5 million for the ambulance service.
It's not extra.
There's another £40 million.
I'm sorry, but it's not extra.
You're doing a good job of gerrymandering. There's a lady here wants to talk.
NHS, you've got it wrong.
If you want to make any cuts, why can't you do it for the HS2?
Yes, the HS2. Get rid of that. That's a rich man's train.
Yeah.
My name is Catherine Atkinson. I'm the Labour parliamentary candidate for Erewash. I wanted to make sure people could hear me, that there was a microphone here. I am. I'm a member of the public. I'm a member of the public like everyone here, and I think a lot of people here are very, very concerned. What we have been told is that the reason, I've got a question, the reason that we've been told that part of the reason that we've been told that we need fewer beds is because we want more people at home. But actually, with community concern Erewash being closed, we are absolutely losing the very support that people need that can allow them to be in their homes. So would Maggie, and not the NHS managers who are having to deliver these cuts to our services, would Maggie agree that that would be a false economy that will end up hurting us in the long run? Yeah. And would Maggie agree that there is underfunding that has meant to say whether or not she agrees that these cuts are wrong and that she will join our campaign against cuts to the NHS
Every member, well, almost every member, apart from Zara, who's new, on this panel knows I've had hour after hour of discussions making the case for the residents of Erewash. We've had early morning meetings, we've had late evening meetings, we've had telephone calls at all sorts of times of the day, we've had conference calls. And I would hope that because of my discussions, and I think I can say that because of my discussions, that some of the changes that were going to be made are not now going to be made. So as a Member of Parliament, yes, I could go and sing about it all the time, but you actually get more results when you talk sensibly in the meetings and talk through things in a way that actually you actually put the facts forward and come to a decision between everybody, and that to me is the right way a Member of Parliament should be working.
Chair.
Thank you. What I'd like to do is ask the GP on the end. As a member of Erewash, a resident of Erewash, who's probably one of the most important people in this room, what his thoughts are on the service that's provided from the hospital, and does it meet his requirements for the people that he represents?
By that, do you mean the community hospital?
Absolutely,
I think from a clinical perspective, speak up, please. Can you hear me now? Yes. I think from a clinical perspective, one of the things we need to be looking at is that we do have a cohort of more elderly and more frail patients, like all areas, who have greater health needs and greater levels of vulnerability. We should be looking at how we are best placed to manage those people. Now, when we look at the beds, I think it's very important to look at category 1, category 2, and category 3.
What are those?
In terms of the beds, in terms of what we're delivering. So I didn't think we iterated it fully. A category 3 is sort of a 24-hour nursing care bed, like Ilkeston Community Hospital. A category 2, I don't like using the term categories, but we have to find some way to demarcate them. A category 2 is equivalent to a care home, a residential home, and the category 1 is in a patient's home. A hospital bed is a completely different kettle of fish, obviously. It's an acute setting, they have access to diagnostics, they have access to consultants of various degrees, HDUs, etc. It's most important to try and get the patient into the best place they need to be in terms of their rehabilitation. And it's quite correct that if they're put into a bed that is in too high a category that they don't need to be into, it does adversely affect their rehabilitation. Also, we know that the vast majority of patients, I know I would if I was a patient, would rather be at home than being in a hospital of any shape or form.
Yes, I wouldn't.
We've worked very hard in the area to try and put in place services to support what were Category 1 and Category 2 beds. So we've worked with Will and DCHS, other community services, to put in place, for example, care home services. There's more AMPs going into care homes. Put in place frailty services across the communities. And we also have now what's called a community GP, who is a GP who works purely in the community, looking after the patients who are not able to get to the surgery. So I think there's a wider picture with regard to that.
So do you agree it's a false economy to cut community concern Erewash, which support people in their homes, when that means
I was going to go on to the voluntary sector. I'll talk a little bit. I was going to go on to the voluntary sector. I think both externally from the public, quite correctly, and there have been some very valid comments made here, but also from within the governing bodies, there is clear challenge with regard to anything with regard to the voluntary sector. We talk about the concept of unintended consequences. So if something is removed or taken away, what is going to be the consequence of that that may fall out? Will that have an impact on the NHS? Will those patients take up GP appointments or hospital times? And these are the things that we need to continue to work through. And particularly in Erewash with the Vanguard, the voluntary sector is very, very important. We're fully aware of that. We're fully aware of the workload that it undertakes hidden, and we're fully aware of the costings around that. And that's why we continue to look at it and try and work through those unintended consequences.
So you try and stop the funding cuts to community concern Erewash before it's too late?
That will go through the governing body, and we will look at everything to see what the consequences might be for the wider healthcare community and look at it from there.
Thanks, Doctor. So what are your major concerns then for Erewash at the moment?
Has he got enough money for
Do you want me to answer that one? I think the concerns are very clear. There's clearly with the NHS community, there's a financial concern across all of the NHS, not just the NHS, but in all sectors. And I think within the NHS community, we need to be looking at keeping, training up, and retaining our staff.
How about charging the car park, people who park in there, getting on a bus and going into Derby and filling up the car park where none of these patients, visitors can get a car parking space? A bit of revenue from that car park would go a long way.
It's a good point. Very quick answer, because we didn't call it first question, but anyway.
Car parking is always a big issue, and access to health service buildings, inevitably, most people got cars, most people want to drive. We're very proud at DCHS that we've been able to retain free car parking. Now, it hasn't been possible in all hospitals across the country. Most of the acutes now have to charge. What I'd like to challenge you and the community is, if you know of people who are using the hospital car park and catching the bus, please can you bring some pressure to bear on them, because I believe it would be the wrong thing for us to introduce charging at Ilkeston Community Hospital for car parking as well.
There's about 6 rows back. Yes.
I can't stand it like it because I've got a really bad back, but I'd just like to put the flip side to this hospital bed situation. My mother died in a hospital and terminal palliative care. My brother's now with the nursing home having palliative care. You know what type of bed? The bed that is like a nursing home. Purely because it's medically, he doesn't need nursing care in that way. These people who come and feed him, look after, nurses aren't there for that. I know about health nurses. Plus the fact the Erewash care team, I have heard of it, from the scrutiny, you've had them for about 4 weeks. They're absolutely fabulous. The care of the community is fabulous. And when you die, you want to be with your family if possible. Not sat in a bed in a hospital.
That is true.
Yeah.
Well, it's just fucking fun that I had a choice. You know what? I rang my GP, she said, right, Janet, where would you prefer? It was a hospital, a nursing home. I said the nursing home is fully funded, continuing care, fantastic. It's all right slagging everything off like some people want.
Well said, well said.
There's been studies recently by the hospice movement to find out where people do want to end their lives in those cases. And the majority would want to be at home, and that's why our amazing hospice treetops, a lot of they deliver care in the home, end-of-life care in the home, which is fantastic, even though now wanting some beds as well, which is great as well. The second most popular place is a care home, and the last place that people want to be to end their life is a hospital. So I think your family's got it right. Thank you for those comments. Yeah. John, over there.
Yeah, John Ryan. I'd like to ask the panel, what is being done internally to address the historical poor management decisions taken by the CCGs, particularly in the north, which have resulted in this situation, and how can key decision makers be held more accountable to the public in future?
Thank you. A very complex question in reality. So, what we are doing across Derbyshire, and part of the reason I'm here, and I'll do my best on your behalf, is that we're bringing commissioning together. So we have 4 organisations across Derbyshire covering over 1 million population. What we found when you have 4 organisations all trying to do the same job actually, is that you get a lot of variation in what they do. So some of the things that I've noticed coming in as a newcomer is the inconsistency that you find in the services across Derbyshire. So actually what you get in one area, you don't get in another. So one of the things that we are doing by bringing the organisations together, and many of the members of the audience will be aware, we are in the process of formally merging the organisations, if we get agreement to do so, is to create a consistency of decision, consistency of approach, through that trying to create a consistency on the ground of the services that patients get and remove any chance of postcode lotteries. That's a really important point. Now those CCGs back in 2012 when they started to form and they became formal in 2013, they set up themselves in that way for good reason. They wanted to be local, they wanted to engage those local GPs as part of the change. But what we found is that working in that isolated way, they didn't have the power to influence care across Derbyshire. And so that's another important thing that we're doing. By bringing the commissioners together, we can look at hospital care, we can work more effectively with the local authority, and we can have a much more consistent approach. So I think that your question was, what are we doing to make sure that we move forward? I think that's right, that we are looking at this consistency of approach. It does allow us to look at our spend. Tonight a lot of discussion about money. It allows us to look at the spend on our services, just make sure that we're spending in the most wise way. So I think there is a lot that we can learn. I think that the North Derbyshire question is an important one, because what's happened here, the features that you see in North Derbyshire are there in all aspects of Derbyshire. North Derbyshire was the first of our CCGs back in financial year 16-17, where its finances went off. But the principles there are also in the other CCGs across Derbyshire, just different scales and time of where they've emerged. So the truth of the matter is, and I think Abby was getting to this point, we are as a society living longer. We are as a society having more conditions, what we call long-term conditions, as we live longer. When the healthcare system was set up 70 years ago, the health needs of the population were very different. And ultimately, we're trying to adjust to what is a very different situation that we have now. The technologies are considerably different. What we can do, a gentleman there, second knee replacement was mentioned, we do more and more. And we have to address the situation. Underneath this is about the rising demand for services versus the resources that we have.
More resources. More resources.
Just that lady, I don't think anybody here is complaining about the services that are provided, because they're excellent when you do get them. It's about losing them. Really. And also, I think you contradict yourselves, because you're all sort of saying that we need care in the community, we need people to get nearer to home. And yet, we've got people in hospital who've had to wait to get to Ilkeston. The trauma of having to travel to Derby and Nottingham every day when you've got somebody in is terrible for the families. And to cut the beds at Ilkeston now, it means that they'll be in those beds for longer. They won't be going home. You know, those that need that help, those beds are being cut.
So, Maggie, if you
Type 3 bed or
I'll answer that
whatever
question again.
it's
So I'm sorry if I didn't make the point clear enough, and I'll reiterate, so apologies if I'm repeating. The CCGs, the commissioners, will not ask Will to shut those beds until we are clear. And as I say, there's work going on.
I don't think you need a report, just ask the people here.
Excuse me, madam. Let me explain. So, unless we are clear that we have alternatives in place, as Gavin has also commented on, that would ensure that we don't have to block beds in Royal Derby, and that we can get a flow.
But I don't think you need a report on that. We can tell you that.
Yes, and I'm sure there is a wealth.
And then the aftercare, getting rid of all the voluntary services, is you're just contradicting yourselves. You're not enabling people in their own home. You're taking it all away from them.
So I'll take your point, madam. Let me just continue to just explain. So it is, we've said it a few times tonight, so it's about making sure that you've got the right type of bed for the right patient needs. That's what this is about. And that process, we're still working through it, so there's no conclusions as I currently speak. The second point around the voluntary sector is a really important point. If Maggie will allow me just to say a couple more words on this. The commissioners, the NHS in Derbyshire, and I did say this to Scrutiny Committee last week, spends over £8.5 million on the voluntary sector across Derbyshire. That is fact. And the area that we are looking at, excuse me, madam, if you allow me to finish. The area we are looking at is a small proportion of that spend that relates to services that are not uniform across Derbyshire, that they have developed historically, they're not consistent. You get a very different approach across the communities that we have.
So a really good service has got to be lost because they haven't got it somewhere else.
Should be uniform across Derbyshire.
Excuse me, if you let me finish. And so when we are reviewing our services, we have to look at what is the model of care we need to get in the 8 places that we talked about in Derbyshire and create some consistency. Now, if I could just say, it is probably worth, because I know I'm very passionate about this, just talking about some of the things that Erewash has, and that the commissioners have critiqued. No, has. Erewash, comparatively, has a lot of additional services here.
Lots of people live here.
That we don't have uniformly across the county. So I'll stop there, Maggie, and take some more questions.
I'll do it in 2 seconds then. So I've iterated some already. There's a care home service where AMPs go into care homes as well as GPs to look after the patients both proactively and reactively. So ward rounds are done regularly. There's a frailty service which operates in terms of AMPs, physios, OTs, dietitians, looking after patients in the community, which is a service that wasn't there before. I can only iterate the services that are there. There's a community GP that's in place, as I said before, whose job is to work across the community. Don't forget, all of these things are taking the pressure off general practice allowing them to deliver more appointments at varying times. We also have an on-day service that operates out of both Ilkeston and Long Eaton, increasing the number of appointments that are available that day to patients who ring up wanting to be seen. That in turn allows GPs to offer longer appointments to a different cohort of patients with multiple problems. We also have the extended access hubs open on Saturdays and weekends and to 8 p.m.
You're sitting there with nobody, and the only person who sees some of this voluntary sector, and you couldn't all
Some of the services that are put in place through the care coordination schemes and the community GP, what we call the frailty service, does address that. So there's actually increased continuity of care for a cohort of patients who are housebound, whether it be in a care home or whether
when
it
they
be...
slip away from that, there's a big majority and there's a shortfall of care, and that comes from these community people.
Erewash community concern.
She's had her hand up.
Yeah, so I'll pass back, because I think I've iterated that.
Yeah. We hear from Amy.
I'm going to take David behind.
Oh, thank you very much. My name's Dave Doyle. I'd rather hear from Amy, but just a couple of questions. On the beds issue, Chris, you said, to quote, we've got too many beds. I won't write what I say, I won't go underneath it. Gavin, you turned around and says, we've not got enough beds. And is it William Jones?
I'm William, yeah.
Are you the one who can tell us how many beds have been cut at Ilkeston Council, Ilkeston Community Hospital?
There haven't been any beds.
How many will be cut? Or no? Sorry, I'm going to get just a quick, wait, can I just, because I wanted to hear from Amy, but I really did want to get in touch with Vicky here. You're the director for the STP. You've really got a bad job. I hope you're getting paid more than 30 cases. So if I can pass it on.
Amy. Who are you? Stand up, Miss Fraser. Go on, Amy, speak out.
Hi everybody, I'm Amy. I run a community concern Erewash and Bright Street Laundry with my colleague Elaine Scoggins.
Amy, take the microphone, go on.
Please.
Go
on, Amy.
Hi everybody, my name is Amy from Community Concern Erewash and Bright Street Laundry. As you all know, we are closing. I don't think it's actually going to happen, but it's going to prevent that. It did come in the wake of CCG funding cuts. We did have all of our core funding cut back in 2016. And I don't actually think that if CCG come back now and say, here's £30,000, it's not enough to keep us open. We've had to give funding back to other funders because you were a match funder. Okay, so it is happening, I'm afraid. So what we are focusing on now is the future, okay, and we're trying to find alternative provision for our elderly and terminally ill and clients that have got a mental or physical disability. So we're working with Erewash CVS, with Sally Scott, she's the chief exec here. We're working with Amber Valley CVS. They do have a gardening service that operates across Erewash. The problem that we find is that a lot of charities are at maximum capacity and they don't have enough funding. So my plea now is to the NHS is please invest. And I know I fully appreciate you have to protect your frontline services and your A&E, there's massive demands. But just for example, in October 2016, we were awarded £33,000 to deliver an 18-month project. Yes. That was for 2 projects, so one for Community Concern Erewash, one for Bright Street Laundry. And so you can imagine £33,000 over 18 months for 2 organisations is pretty much nothing, really, realistically. And from that investment, from that £33,000, using your unit cost of health and social care, 2015, we saved the NHS £2 million. Yes. So from a really, really minor investment, you are getting huge savings. I've had messages from Ilkeston Hospital. The ward staff are really concerned because we're delivering a project now, which Elaine is heading up, and it's called Independent at Home. That comes in next Friday. We smashed our targets on that with the CCG. And we go on towards Derby Royal Queen City Hospital. And we help to get people out of hospital quicker because there is a massive issue with bed booking. Absolutely massive issue. With Ilkeston Hospital, we go from the wards and we collect laundry from your patients that have got MRSA, C. diff. And we can treat that laundry properly and we can help to keep them healthy and we can get them home quicker. We then support them in the home environment with hot meals on wheels because some of them can't cook themselves. Yes, so with Ilkeston Hospital, our home comforts team, we move furniture downstairs, we'll make a quick there, we'll make sure the equipment's in place, so we get people out of hospital quicker. And I honestly think that by cutting funding to the voluntary community sector is so short-sighted, because it might save you £1 million this year, but next year it'll be 20, 30 million.
Yeah. Then you've lost
It's gone.
Yeah, it's gone good now.
Yeah. You cannot do that.
Thank you.
Why don't you answer the question, Maggie?
Are you actually?
Go on, Chris. Do the right thing.
I'm going to try. I mean,
Come you, Wally.
thank you, really. I mean, you put forward a very eloquent description. I think, please don't take this as anything that, you know, that we don't see value in the work that's done, and we don't appreciate the work that's done. I come back to.
I would actually dispute that because I was at a meeting at Erewash CVS at the beginning of July, and the chair of Derbyshire CCG kept repeatedly saying that he did not think that the BCS was regulated or was value for money. And that just infuriated me.
So if I just pick out that as a slightly separate issue, and I will do that, I will do it. I'll pick up the CBS, and that's an important point. So these are incredibly difficult decisions. Some of these decisions have not yet been made, and as Abby says, the following process, and I'm sorry to hear that, because the decision about community concern Erewash, the Bright Street Laundry hasn't yet been made, but I reckon the reality of the situation and the processes that we're going through, you know as well as I do, you know, the processes related to scrutiny that we're going through. And that's the position where we are. The truth of the matter is that there are still more people going through our hospital services throughout the county and throughout other statutory NHS services that we all expect to be there when we need them.
Yeah, we do.
Either ambulances or intensive care in Gavin's place, or you know, or GPs as Abby's talked about. We expect them to be there. And the truth of the matter is that the total sum of the money that we have, you know, is exceeding
not
by
enough. It's not enough money, is it?
It's
not enough money, is
it? Excuse me if I may. So this is the money that we receive.
Yeah.
That's the money we get.
Not enough.
And currently,
not enough.
We are overspent. I'll pick up the point about the
being bullied by the NHS England and the government.
If I may, madam, it's an important point about CVS. So, of the discretionary funds I talked about, so we will continue to invest in the voluntary sector. The governing bodies have committed to work particularly with the local authorities in partnership to look at the total spend that we spend together. And I'm hopeful in the weeks to come that we can come to an agreement about how we do that process. We will continue to invest in the voluntary sector, but what we need to do is invest in a targeted way and agree as a system as to where that needs to be spent, so that we can create some consistency across. The point relating to the CVS is a really good one. So, in terms of the proposals we're looking at, it splits half and half So there are some services like the one you've described. There are other services in what we call infrastructure. So so organisations like the CVS that support the charity sector. And that's what we're looking at right now as well, is the infrastructure funding. And again, we're working with the local authority now just to see what we can do, and with the sector itself, to see what we can do about trying to support that going forward. And I'm going to take a position on that to the governing body at the end of the month on where we've got to.
So a question from a young man about 6 rows back. Had his hand up for a long time.
I find the delivery and composition of this panel to be very biased towards your viewpoint. Will you consider reconvening a similar panel later and putting the plan changes on hold until you do, with a less biased chair and some people who think differently to you?
Can you suggest who you want on the panel?
A level playing field.
We did talk earlier that
A level playing field.
different old person. I think you've got people here who will make the decisions, and to me you can't do better than that. Sorry, the gentleman just in front of you.
I was interested, and I have to admit that I was unaware of the work done by the laundry lady who spoke a few moments ago. Now that strikes me as outsourced or private. And I don't know whether I'm in favour of that or not. People down here all seem to cheer the laundry lady for what they wanted. So are there more facilities like laundry that you think could be sent to people like the lady concerned, or some of the gentlemen as well, to do? Because if she says that for the expenditure of tens of thousands she can save millions, that seems an attractive possibility to me, and it got a very good round of applause from quite a lot of the noisier people here. So, if I speak for a minute or two longer, you've got time to think of other services that could be outsourced, like laundry. I can't think of one because I don't know enough about it, certain, and not to make silly mistakes. If that can be done, you can do it. You must have a friend who could do more for them and save more millions. Thank you for what you've done.
Well said. Well said.
Thank you. I'm a parent carer actually, Wendy Pratty. My son's worked for Erewash Community Concern, which is a great project, and it saves lives, and it saves people going into those hospital beds.
How many years?
And he's worked for 17 years nearly. Now, what I've heard tonight, everything I've heard tonight, God, okay, I feel like, okay, you explained very well what you said. I understand what you've been saying. But I feel like NHS England has got this pot of money and they're bullies. They're bullies. But not only are they bullies, the government. The government are not spending the money that we need. And you're saying it, really. You're saying you don't have enough money. The services we have right now, what we have right now, is what we need. We don't want any services cutting. We don't need those services cutting because they work. They all work. And why do you come in here today and why hasn't Maggie gone to government and said, I'm sorry, but we can't take those cuts. Let's just forget that debt, strike it off, and keep going as we are because we're doing a good job here in Erewash and we need that flipping money.
Can I just say, actually, it's a different, it is a different perspective to what's actually really is the case. If you let me finish, you might actually find out what I've got to say. The problem is that the CCG, with effect are spent. In other words, they commissioned too many services based on what the budget was. Now, and obviously it's happened over time that services have been commissioned that perhaps weren't negotiated right or various different issues on services that perhaps weren't most cost effective, or as you've heard, different pathways for patients to get them in the right pathway. So it's actually the budget increased for the whole of Derbyshire by 2.8% this year for the NHS. Still less than inflation. There's the Labour Party leaflet, you can tell it's Labour Party by the imprint on it. And what Labour don't tell you is they were only going to increase the NHS spending by 2.2%. As of next year, the new spending round, it will be a 3.4% increase, which was equivalent to eventually an extra £20.5 billion. That's far more than any of the parties committed to spend. If you're saying it's about how you spend the money, not about how much money you've got.
Have you got a crystal ball?
I'm sorry, but actually, what it's about is what we've got now. We don't want to lose what we've got now because it works, and we need that now, right? So, we'll just strike the debt, strike it off, because quite frankly, people come first, before any HS2 train, but that's for the rich. That's what comes first. People who need health services, and that's where the money should go. Nobody should have austerity in health services.
Behind Danny, and then there were two of you, so and then the gentleman first. Whichever first, I'm happy with one.
Blue Ball, I think I spent my time in the voluntary sector. When the two mental health sectors came together from the north and the south of Derbyshire, became the Derbyshire Healthcare Foundation Trust. I was the first lead governor, 3.5 years. When I finished there, I became a director of Derbyshire Mine. I'm still a member of Mental Health Action Group, all in the voluntary sector. When I received a notification the other day from the Mental Health Action Group, not from anyone else, about this meeting, I was under the impression I was coming here tonight to listen to what has been available from the NHS over the last few years and what's going to be available in the future. I haven't heard any of that. All I've heard is people being allowed to ride their own hobby horses. And I don't disagree with that, but only when we all know what we've had and what we've got to come. Because there's no point in riding hobby horses if it's the wrong horse to ride. When it comes to equality over Derbyshire, very difficult to achieve, as I know through the mental health service. 1/3 of the population live in Derby, 1/3 of the population live in Chesterfield, and almost 1/3 live in Erewash. Those poor sods right in the north of Derbyshire are right out on a limb. They will never, ever get the same services. No. So we do need a lot of services here because we are almost 1/3 of the population of Derbyshire. What I wanted to know tonight is what have we got in Erewash now that we're not going to have next year? And I haven't heard one word of that still. Thank you.
What we're not going to have is
So yes, you're right. If I just take, there's a lot in what you've said, so there is a lot. So it's going to be a challenge in terms of we will never be able to get complete uniformity across Derbyshire because it probably is impossible. What we can do is try and set the same standards. But you're absolutely right, the services will have to be different because of the different nature. So a service in the middle of Derby will be different to a service up in the rural peaks, of course it will. But we have to start to think about it because we're all citizens wherever we live, and we all deserve access to NHS services. So that's the important job for us to do. That's important. In terms of Erewash, I think we've been pretty clear tonight. We've heard from Amy, and that's a real case in point. But actually, in terms of the services that we're talking about from a savings point of view, Erewash will continue in the main as it currently is, because in the £51 million savings plan, we have limited the areas for what we call decommissioning to a small proportion of that. So we've heard about the voluntary sector that we're making decisions about now. We've set out tonight that Ilkeston Hospital will continue to be a vibrant sector. I was there the other day, and actually there's a lot going on there. We're working through the beds there, and I've described what that is. General practice will continue, The community services, otherwise, the nursing services that we have will continue. And so I hope I've given some assurance. I'll finish by saying that we will still spend across Derbyshire just short of £1.6 billion on healthcare going forward. And that's a
Why isn't it 2 billion?
Well, it should be 3 billion, Danny. We'll have to live in our means, mate.
I agree. Oh, austerity, you mean?
I've got a couple of questions because I think, like a lot of the people in here, I don't speak civil servant. So there's quite a few things that the experts down at the front here have said that I don't understand. And I just want a couple of clarifications before I ask the question. So the GP on the end, I heard you mention that the Ilkeston Hospital is a pathway 3 hospital. Is that the majority of the service?
The beds, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So in terms of that, what does pathway 3 mean? Yeah, I want you to do it again because it's very important about that.
Pathway, so again, you have an acute hospital bed in a hospital, so like Gavin's Hospital. You then have patients who need, obviously, an acute hospital bed and home on your own, 2 very binary situations.
Yep.
And it makes sense to have some form of transition. Category 1, 2, 3 are parts of that transition. So category 3 is within Ilkeston. So it's a bed in a hospital environment, the 24-hour nursing care, and you see what I mean.
Yeah, that's a great answer. That's all I need from you. Gavin, you said earlier that we don't have enough pathway 2 beds. Is that right?
Yes. So just to finish off Abby's explanation, so pathway 2 bed is in a residential setting, but with therapy support, so that that person can recover their ability to function.
Okay. So looking at the framework, under pathway 2, you've got things like self-care at home. You've got pathway 1 at home, which is people who've been sent home from the hospital. You've got local authority funded care homes, and you've got self-funded care homes. They all fall under pathway 2. Now, I don't know about anybody else here, but self-care at home sounds awfully like the sorts of services that we're seeing being done here in terms of the Erewash care community. And it strikes me as very strange if we're talking about allocation of funding here, which is what you're basically talking about today, that those cuts are being made to an area where we don't have enough beds, we don't have enough service ready. You said that, Gavin. And yet the funding is being taken away from that. Can somebody help me understand what on earth is going on? Because if this is meant to be the logic we're meant to follow, and that's what you're putting forward here, and I respect you as experts in saying that, can somebody justify it for me, please?
Yeah.
So I think it's really important. So the pathway 2 beds, these residential beds. So what we're talking about tonight is the NHS services. So where the NHS money is spent. So the NHS would spend money on the pathway 3 beds, so those community hospital beds. That would be a traditional NHS spend. The NHS wouldn't normally fund residential care in a residential home, for example, or obviously in people's homes. The NHS would fund elements of the care that go into those homes. So we talked about therapy. We have something called continuing health care that funds that. The lady who's gone talked about that earlier. So this is where the NHS spends. What we're doing in Derbyshire, I think Gavin's right, the work that we're doing in recent weeks is to look at the numbers of the different types of bed that we've got, irrespective of where the funding comes. So they're working with local authority to say, what are the number of residential beds that we have? What's the need? It isn't just the bed though, this is a really important point. It isn't just the bed, it's the domiciliary care that goes into them, particularly those those patients who can go home, having the domiciliary care to go into them as well. So what we're talking here is about the NHS element of the spend. And what we need to do as a system is ensure that we've got the right numbers across the board. And that isn't just the NHS.
It feels like that's kind of not the issue here, because this is a community service that is currently funded by the NHS through the grants that they receive, and that is a service that is used in the community to minimise the costs that NHS face in terms of dealing with these patients. So by cutting that service, you're going to be increasing the direct costs that the NHS faces in terms of dealing with patients at home and illnesses and other issues that they face. And I guess what I'm saying is, there's a businessman, I look at this and I see a bad business model. It doesn't stack up. And I don't understand where the logic is. They're just trying to commit to the end. I just want to understand.
I'll do my best, and forgive me. The truth is, and I keep coming back to this point, I've been consistent in this, and I'm trying to keep saying that the total of the NHS resource that we have does not cover the current spend that is going on in Derbyshire. So that is the point, that is the material point, and it's the NHS spend that doesn't cover what the current source.
Question, Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Councillor Kevin Miller. I think I'm among friends here.
Indeed you are, you're safe with us.
Before I ask my question, I'd like to make a little statement that whenever I have come into contact with the NHS, or my family has for emergency treatment, whatever, it's been a fantastic experience, treated with respect, treated with humour, for everyone in the NHS from top to bottom. And I'm sure everyone in this room has a similar story, even John Crow. Is that right?
What's your
So
point?
my question is, how can the CCG prevent people from wasting NHS resources? Typical about the car park question, how do you stop it? Thank you.
Typical councillor. Wyndham Chris.
Typical Tory councillor.
Thank you. I see a lot of patients, and I don't see anybody knowingly wasting NHS resources. I think the key about it is, and we have PPG groups, all the practices do, is a couple of things. A, being candid with the patient population. Patients are clever, they understand what's going on. They understand their money is tight, and they understand the pressure that the NHS is under. I think education is very important with regard to what patients can and cannot expect, and addressing, being realistic. And we're also trying to put in place, particularly self-care mechanisms locally, particularly in Erewash, with regard to how patients may be able to look after themselves without having to access a GP or a pharmacist or something of that ilk. So I think there's various mechanisms, but I would say that most of the time I'm not seeing anybody knowingly abuse the service, and it can be that it's a simple discussion that you have with a patient when they come to see you, and that can often very much alter what we call health-seeking behaviour down the line. So it's a simple one of, you come in for some antibiotics because you've got a sore throat, quite appropriately. The GP might say, you don't need antibiotics for that sore throat, but actually what I'm going to do is, I'm going to give you what's called a deferred prescription. So I'm going to give you a prescription, but don't take it for 2 or 3 days. See what happens. Your sore throat goes away, rip it up, put it in the bin. Your sore throat continues, then obviously you take it or it gets worse. There's a lot of evidence that says that a lot of patients listen, don't take it, rip the prescription up, and in future they won't then present for that same thing. Very simple of education. There's various facets, but not really knowingly to waste resources. Thank you.
I've got some hands up for people who've had hands up before and who've asked questions before, so I'm going to skip you, but you're still there in my head. But a lady there's two ladies together. So there's Eileen and the lady behind. So yes, and then
Thank you. My name's Caroline. I've just got a quick question. Obviously, all of these discussions seem to boil down to the fact that more money's been spent than Derbyshire's actually got. So my question is, what safeguards are being put in place to prevent future overspend so that we're not going to have to try and have all these cuts in the future of the services? Because in most of our jobs, if we were responsible for budgets and we're doing massive overspend, there'd be a lot of difficult questions to answer. And, you know, there's redundancies and that sort of thing, which is kind of where Derbyshire seems to be with the NHS part at the moment. So what can be done to stop these future overspends so we're not in this position again?
Excellent question.
I will just say that that's an excellent question, so thank you for asking. In terms of all of the work that needs to be done to try and manage our finances moving forward, that is the role of the STP. Remember at BNS that's about working with organisations across health and social care, working together in partnership. And that's about working in partnership. It's not about increasing competition between organisations. It's about trying to work together to make sure that patients get care in the right place at the right time. And there's lots of examples we've given about that today. So lots of the work that we're trying to do, working together as organisations, are about looking at how we can provide services in a different way in the future, some of which will cost less. And some of the reasons some of those services will cost less are because we might look at taking out steps in that patient journey or that patient experience. So, for example, there might be a patient experience where somebody goes to the hospital 4 or 5 times to see different professionals. What we can do is try and make sure that all those professionals are in the same place at the same time, and that the individual, myself, yourself, whomever, only needs to go that once, and that cuts out a lot of duplication and cuts out and then reduces the cost of care. So that's a way that we can deliver services differently, but actually it's better for patients and service users because they might only have to go once rather than potentially having to go 4 times. So that's just an example of the type of way that we would approach that.
Is there going to be, sorry, just to finish, is there going to be something then kind of in place almost, you know, when you get the ceiling of your budget, what's going to happen to stop going over budget again? I understand what you're saying, it makes perfect sense, but there's still a limited fund of money, and once you spend it, haven't you? You can't keep overspending because there's no more money, it's got to come from somewhere, hasn't it? So how can we stop, collectively, how can we stop overspending the NHS budget?
I'm going to let Gavin answer that question.
Better procurement.
Thanks. I mean, I think, you know, I'll give you a perspective from somebody who runs an acute hospital, and I think the key dilemma is if I've got a patient who comes to my hospital in an ambulance, I can't send them away. You know, they have, and clearly, you know, we clearly wouldn't want to do that, but we're there to look after patients. So I think that the dilemma is that the demand for health services, you know, I mean, I've been in the NHS for about 30 years, is always to some degree outstrips supply, so that's a problem. So I think the solutions aren't as simple as, you know, you reach your budget and then you stop, because patients will still need us, and we'll still need to look after those patients. But what we do need to do as a health system, and we've talked a lot about money tonight, which I kind of understand that, but actually the challenge is bigger than just the money. It's about how we organise services, but also how do we improve the quality of services. And to be frank, you know, it often in discussions like this, it's like it's a binary thing. You either have, you know, more money for better services, you can't have them both together, but I think we can. I think there are things you can do to deliver better quality services at less cost. So again, if you think about my hospital, Chris has commissioned from me about 4% more emergency activity this year than last year. And the reason why he's done that is because we've done all the modelling, and we unfortunately think that the demand for emergency admissions is going to grow this year. But actually, part of what the SDP is trying to do is if we can develop services in local communities in a better way, so that we well, I'm not going to disagree with that, but if we can anticipate things that are going wrong for individual patients and put a set of responses that wrap around that particular patient so that they don't end up in an ambulance outside the A&E departments at rural Derby. Now what that means is it actually reduces costs, because actually to spend the night in my hospital is an expensive business, but actually it's better care. The patients I talk to, with, as much as they like being in Rural Derby Hospital, I think they'd much rather be, at home and not in the hospital at all. So it is possible. I do think that is what the SDP is trying to do, but it's a difficult, it's a difficult mix.
Yep. There's a gentleman in the blue jumper, sorry, there was two of you, the other guy got the question, and I forgot to come back to you, so yes, you want to ask your question? Yes.
Okay, well this question I think is changing a bit over time, because it's a long time since I first conceived it, but it's been possible to believe at times tonight that what is happening is simply as a result of a review of needs, so that we only need a certain amount of money, we only need a certain amount of services. So that's fine. But then at other times it's been possible to believe that there are actual cuts going to have to be made because the budget isn't there to meet the known needs. So there's two different animals. One is a cut, one is, and it's saying there is a need but we can't actually supply it. The other is saying the need has changed, it's no longer there, so we can make savings. So there are those two things, and then more recently, there seems to have been this third thing, which is about overspend. Now, from what you're saying, sorry, I'm forgetting your name, but you're saying, it sounds as though, in a way, the overspend is an indicator of need that's exceeding what was expected. Yeah? So then, the resources need to be tailored towards that, don't they? But then that can happen either by, well, the money's got to be found somewhere because this is a need that's got to be addressed, or we have to find a better way of working so that we can meet that within the existing funding. So I think there seem to be three things here, and it's only just beginning to emerge, the differences between them. So, I mean, is that a correct analysis of what is actually, this is actually all about? So I'm trying to get a handle on it, really.
Well, I guess just an observation I'll perhaps pass on to a CCG colleague, but I thought that was an incredibly insightful analysis. And I think, part of the difficulty is, as Chris has said, we are as a health economy facing an immediate problem in terms of funding.
Yeah.
And consequently, there are decisions being made, perhaps, which are about addressing that immediate need. But I think what we need to focus on is more this thing about how do we solve the problem for the longer term. And I think the only way to do that is by looking at the way that we deliver services. And I genuinely believe there are ways of delivering services which are better for patients and actually cost less for the NHS. And that's what the SDP is committed to try and do.
I'm happy to make an additional comment. I think the really important thing as well is we have featured on cutbacks. But we also need to recognise as well that there are some good news stories and investments going on as well. One of the examples around some of the last few questions that we've had about what could we do, how can we work within budgets, how can we become more efficient, I'll give you an example. The CCG have just in the last few months invested nearly £1 million, so it's £1 million over a year, with the community trust that I work for. And that's an investment in ensuring that when people have an orthopaedic, a muscle joint problem, that they get seen by an advanced skills physiotherapist so that they can immediately assess the problem that they've got, that they can then refer on to an orthopaedic specialist if that is appropriate, or that they can then provide a course of treatment. And the reason that the CCG have invested in this is that we have been going over our budgets
in Derbyshire on orthopaedic services. And the CCG have looked at the evidence that there is about getting early intervention from physiotherapists and able to demonstrate that that does actually provide a quicker access to service, and in the long run it actually saves us money. So there are some really good examples of how we can transform and change the way in which we provide care.
After that, first roundabout, please.
Thank you. Okay, I've been waiting for an hour and 40 minutes. Do you hear me in the back? Yeah, it's great. So I've waited for an hour and 40 minutes. I'm going to keep it very, very short, sharp to the point. 2 years ago, it was exactly the day, I was told I mustn't listen to scaremongering and wicked rumours about the impending closure of Babington Hospital by a Member of Parliament. This April, we were told Babington Hospital will be closed and there will be no nursed beds in Belgium. These nursed beds are for palliative and for life care, respite, but particularly for intensive rehab. Some of the patients who visit Babington aren't stretchered in, they're not wheeled in, they're taken on hoists. And the Care Quality Commission always gives the team in Babington and the hospital an absolute top recommendation. Now, when we were told that Babington was going to close, one of the arguments given was that there was surplus capacity across Derbyshire, particularly beds in Ilkeston Hospital. And now I read that staff from Ilkeston Community Hospital have been told there will be bed losses in both wards from the 1st of October. So I don't know where this spare capacity in Derbyshire is going to be for 20 beds in Babington Hospital, catering for serious intensive rehab, not pathway to serious intensive rehab. There was no open consultation, it was a brief engagement. Back in March, there will still be no full consultation. And there is still no public consultation about the cuts, not just the voluntary sector, but of £51 million across the board. So please, if you're doing nothing, on Monday the 1st of October, 1:30, please come along to Kentor and Matlock and ask that question. My question was for Dr. Clayton, unfortunately he's gone now. So I will ask a question to the panel anyway. Will there be, when and where, will there be a proper public consultation about these cuts?
Thank you very much for your question. Can you hear me okay? So I think the consultation question is a really important one, and for those who aren't aware, the CCGs are the sort of statutory organisations who need to lead consultation processes if there are big service changes. We've also talked about a lot of different subjects tonight, be it community hospital beds, voluntary sector, all sorts of things, and looking to the future as to what we might do. We obviously know it's the right thing to do to engage with people and to listen to people like we have done tonight, and to undertake consultation where we need to in terms of the process. So the commitment from the CCG is given that we're legally obliged to it, as well as knowing it's the right thing to do, is that when there are major service changes, and in terms of the law, being very sort of formal about it, we need to consult, and obviously we would do that. But obviously there are areas where we seek advice to check whether we do need to consult in terms of formal consultation. But what we'll always want to do is to listen and to engage, and to always have engagement around the things that we're proposing.
Can I just a very quick answer back on that? You mentioned the legal obligation of consultation, and yet in April this year, there was no need for full consultation because there was no service changes. Now, the service changes will lack of nurse beds in Babington Hospital and respectively proposed, maybe never, rebuild on Derby Street. Now, I'm still seriously waiting for a full open consultation. This one, like £51 million worth of cuts. It just hasn't happened. We've been asking for it for 3 years, and it has not happened.
So I apologise because I've literally joined the CCG in the last few weeks. I don't know about that particular case, but I suppose from experience of working in other areas as well, we will always do a formal consultation where we are legally obliged to, as a statutory organisation to do so. So I don't know whether that example, whether it was more around an engagement and a formal consultation with colleagues who might know.
So will there be a consultation on the £51 million cuts? No.
So the £51 million savings programme is made up of all sorts of different things in order to meet the budget requirements in year. If there are major service changes or reconfigurations within that, there's very clear guidance from NHS England on what constitutes that, then we would do formal consultations. That's the law.
Sorry, can we?
It's follow.
Okay, sorry, right. Okay.
Directly. How will we find out about the consultation? Because I'm keen to make sure that I don't miss it. I think that there are a lot of people that might like to have been here tonight that might not have known about it. For example, I know about it because I have a relative that works in the hospital, so I was aware of this meeting. But I would very much like to know how we find out about what the consultation, what sort of consultation it will be. Will it be a public meeting? If so, when and how do we find out when that's happening? Or will it be through social media? Or do we write a letter? How do we know? And could you tell me when we're going to know, please?
So if any formal consultation is going to be launched because there is a major service change and therefore that's what we need to do, we'd obviously do some sort of consultation engagement with people anyway, and these sorts of conversations would form part of that. But we would officially be telling people that we were going to be having a consultation, including how long that consultation would run. They normally would run for 12 weeks if they are formal consultation processes. So we would be sharing those messages with people through the usual communication routes to make sure
Are you saying these £51 million worth of cuts aren't major?
So we're talking about different things here. So we need to be really clear. So our savings programme.
Will there be a consultation? Will there be a consultation on bed cuts at Ilkeston Community Hospital?
So
because that is a major cut.
So there have been no decisions around closing beds at Ilkeston Hospital.
And will there be a consultation?
Well, how come the staff have been told it? Yeah. Work there.
So to try and answer your question.
Can we have one? If you've asked a question and it's only fair, and it's fair for yours to be able to give the answers.
To be fair, to get the answers, Maggie, really.
Yeah, are you going to shut the beds, or aren't you?
So I think we've answered that question before.
No,
Clearly state now whether you're going to cut the beds or not.
No, I said there's no cuts already. Will there be cuts coming?
If you listened instead of hijacking the meeting by the Labour.
Who are you?
You didn't actually say.
Questions, so let's get. We are running out of time.
When will the consultation be?
When will it be?
How will you inform everybody about the consultation? I think that's what it is.
Okay, so in terms of finding out about, so we would put things on our website. We would write out to people. We've got patient groups. There's all sorts of different forums that we would use in order to tell people that we were going to be consulting, so that we can get as many views as possible, and then consider that feedback after the consultation, and ultimately then make decisions on those services.
This lady works at Ilkeston.
Yeah, can you clarify then whether the beds are closing or not? Because we're losing staff everywhere off both wards. I'm looking for another job. We've got no stability now, so are you going to close them? We've been told you are.
That's simple, isn't it? Yes and no.
She works there.
So sitting here tonight, no, we've not made any decisions.
But the staff are
Your
leaving.
manager's telling your staff that the beds are going.
The staff are leaving because they think it's closing. That's the trouble, it's withering.
Question over here, please let people put their hands up, ask the question.
You're losing trained staff.
Are you intelligent people or
That's
not?
what happens when there's threats.
No, absolutely disgraceful.
Yeah.
Can everyone hear?
No.
My name is Irene Knight. I'm former councillor of the borough of Erewash. I'm also past mayor of Erewash.
chairman of the League of Friends of Ilkeston Community Hospital. So you will see from this that I know a little about the residents of the town of Ilkeston and more widely in the borough of Erewash. First of all, I'd like to praise all the staff, I can see staff here and staff over there. I'd like to praise the staff for the work that they do in the hospital.
We don't want praise, we want proper terms and conditions, funding and a proper funded health service. Praise is not enough. I work in the NHS and I don't want praise, I want proper NHS and proper job.
Praise. The staff in the hospital are kind, caring, hard-working, and give first-class service.
And you're treating them abysmally.
Supported through the broadcast, not a question.
I have 65 volunteers in the League of Friends, and I see a lot of these ladies, not necessarily on a daily basis, but from time to time, and I do see what happens in all areas of the hospital, not just in the wards. I'll continue to say that the residents of Ilkeston do not regard the hospital as belonging to the NHS.
Just ask a question, not a statement.
Just a minute, please. You'll get my question in a moment. Everyone else has had their say. Please let me have my say.
Ask the question then.
Residents of Ilkeston do not regard the hospital as belonging to the NHS or the Derbyshire Community Health Service. In fact, they regard the hospital as their hospital. And this is the reason why. Over the years, the residents of Ilkeston and further afield have donated tens of thousands of pounds, or more probably, hundreds of thousands of pounds, enabling the League of Friends to purchase items of equipment and provide services for the benefit of both patients and staff at the Ilkeston Hospital. The concern of the League's volunteers has always been, and still is, that money spent on equipment may one day disappear into another hospital or sit in a corner unused. Currently, the League is being asked for a six-figure sum for equipment in the Diagnostic and Treatment Centre, which the DCHS are unable to fund. Yes, you did hear correctly, a six-figure sum. A very big contribution from the League of Friends, a registered charity which is still thought of as a group of elderly people serving cups of tea. My question is perhaps to William, if you would take the question, William. May I now please ask, how do you perceive the future of the Diagnostic and Treatment Centre?
Thank you, Eileen. And I've said this to you, Eileen, and to your committee. DCHS and the local NHS are extremely grateful for the many years of support that you've given to the hospital. And I think you've underestimated, I think it's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds that you've supported the hospital. So extremely grateful to that. Your question was, what's the future of the Diagnostic and Treatment Centre? I think it's been answered earlier on this evening by Chris. There are no further proposals for change at Ilkeston other than the ones that you heard about this evening. And as far as the Diagnostic and Treatment Centre is concerned, we're looking to actually make investments. So we have, as Gavin referred to, we've got what's called an STP capital investment that is in a tin box down in London somewhere. We're working together to actually be able to look towards specifically investing in and reopening a state-of-the-art endoscopy service at the hospital. And we're working together to be able to get all of the issues that we need that resulted in us having to close that endoscopy unit a couple of years ago sorted, and we're working in partnership. Now that's part of the Diagnostic and Treatment Centre. We're working on a project again together with Derby Hospital, because the majority of the consultants come from Derby Hospital, improving our efficiency and actually increasing the number of surgical lists that we do within the Diagnostic Treatment Centre. Now, you and I are very aware of the issue around the equipment that you're kindly supporting us with, and again, it's an issue of being able to work together to be able to fund it. What I'm looking to do is, I haven't got it within the capital programme for this year, but we're working towards us being able to find the contribution to sort the whole out, so that you can make a contribution from League of Friends and I can be able to match it, but it'll probably be from next April.
I'm going to have to say that we actually have got to finish because I did promise these guys that they would actually that would be away by 8:30. We were going to do a wrap up from each of them, but actually thought it was far better to take more questions from the audience than what was originally planned. Perhaps we can have a word with Will afterwards.
May I just say, that's my understanding, of course in any organisation, you get lots and lots of doing.
Thank you. I would like to just say a huge thank you to the panel for being here, giving their evening and answering so many questions.